Hello everyone. So welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT VRC preparation. Today in this session we'll be taking up the third RC of the economics and management genre. This RC was asked in the second slot of your CAT exam in the year 2018. I've titled this RC as metric-based performance assessments. Now, for those of you who have not watched any videos of these sessions before, know that this the session that in which we'll be dealing with this RC, the questions and explanation, everything, is divided into two parts. The first part is where I explain to you each and every line of the passage. The second part is where I take you through the questions. The current video that you're watching right now is the first part of this particular RC. Okay, this is where I'll be taking you through the passage explainer, and we'll also discuss the central idea. Now, 40 such sessions make up a complete course, which is titled as an anthology of RCs. And by clicking on the cue card on the top right here, you can go and watch the detailed intro of this course. All right. So yeah, so with that, let's start with the passage explainer now. Okay, so the passage explainer screen is split into two parts, as you can see, with the passage on the left side and the schematic area on the right side. Now, the way we'll go about this is that I'll read and explain the whole passage paragraph by paragraph as the schematic diagram simultaneously appears on the right side. Okay, post reading every paragraph, I will explain the same para in detail before moving on to the next paragraph. Okay, all right then. So let's start with the first para. Okay, so let's start. More and more companies, government agencies, educational institutions, and philanthropic organizations are today in the grip of a new phenomena, metric fixation. The key components of metric fixation are the belief that it is possible and desirable to replace professional judgment acquired through personal experience and talent with numerical indicators of comparative performance based upon standardized data, metrics, and that the best way to motivate people within these organizations is by attaching rewards and penalties to their measured performance. That's the first paragraph. Okay, so guys, see, essentially what the author has said here is said in the paragraph is that most organizational entities like companies, government agencies, etc., they they uh, they are these days in the grip of the idea of metric fixation, right? And then he goes on to just briefly describe the two key components of this idea of metric fixation. Now, what is metric fixation? Metric fixation, guys, from the paragraph we can gather that it is basically a term that is used for a set of analytical tools with that can help grade the performance of an employee, for example, in terms of numerical indicators. Okay, a good example of metric fixation would be the use of a bell curve, where you grade the performance of employees or students in educational institutions on a bell curve. Like, okay, so yeah, so that's what metric fixation is. Second, he talks about the first key component. The first key component is basically that it is. He says that it is the first key component of this metric fixation idea is, according to the author, is that it is possible and desirable to replace the experts who used to do this job of appraising the performance of employees and students and other people, right? To replace them who used to do this job by basis their judgment and experience with these new analytical methods. That's the first key component. Second key component is simply that apart from this, the associating rewards and punishments with uh, the results, with the measures, with the performance evaluations that you obtain via these analytical methods is also the best ways to motivate people in this organization. So that's what the first paragraph says. All right, I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, guys. So the second paragraph, it says the rewards can be monetary in the form of pay for performance, say, or reputation in the form of college rankings, hospital ratings, surgical report cards, and so on. But the most dramatic negative effect of metric fixation is that its propensity to incentivize gaming. That is, encouraging professionals to maximize the metrics in ways that are at odds with the larger purpose of the organization. If the rate of major crimes in a district becomes the metric according to which police officers are promoted, then some officers will respond by simply not recording crimes or downgrading them from major offenses to misdemeanors. Or take the case of surgeons. When the metrics of success and failure are made public, affecting their reputation and income, some surgeons will improve their metric scores by refusing to operate on patients with more complex problems, whose surgical outcomes are more likely to be negative, right? Who suffers? The patients who don't get operated upon. So that, guys, is the second paragraph, and now, I'll just take you briefly through it, although it's quite self-explanatory, this particular one. So the author has in this paragraph, what he has done is he has described or elaborated on gaming as one of the uh, disadvantages of metric fixation. Okay, and he basically says that if you start measuring the performance of these professionals just by a few some metrics, then they might be encouraged to just work upon these metrics or just manipulate these metrics, right, in a manner which might not be in line with the overarching goal of the organization. Like here he has given an example of the police officer, where if suppose the metric is the rate of major crimes in a district, so in that case, so as to ensure that his metric does not go down, the police officer might simply not record some major crimes, right? So that's that's a disadvantage. And he also provides the example of the surgeon, where he says that if the metric in case of surgeons is the success and failure of the surgery, then surgeons might simply refuse from operating or taking up difficult surgeries where the outcome is likely to be negative, because in that case, well, their metric again might go down because they're more likely to fail. Anyone is more likely to fail because it's a difficult surgery, right? And again, that goes against the overarching goal of the organization, right? The overarching goal is to help people in case of surgeons, to irrespective of how difficult the operation might be. But then metric fixation is enabling a different kind of behavior here, which the author has termed as gaming, right? So that's what the author says in the second paragraph. Okay, I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next one. Third para. When reward is tied to measured performance, metric fixation just invites this sort of gaming. But metric fixation also leads to a variety of more subtle unintended negative consequences. These include goal displacement, which comes in many varieties. When performance is judged by a few measures and the stakes are high, like keeping one's job, getting a pay rise, or raising the stock price at the time that stock options are vested, people focus on satisfying those measures, often at the expense of other more important organizational goals that are not measured. The best known example is teaching to the test, a widespread phenomena that has distorted primary and secondary education in the United States since the adoption of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. So guys, that is your third paragraph. I'll just take you through it very quickly. See, he basically in the third paragraph he has elaborated on the second type of disadvantage of metric fixation. Right? He basically says that when the he calls it goal displacement. He basically says that in case of metric fixation, when the focus is on a very few number of measures, then the people will automatically they'll end up not focusing on the other more important measures that might be important for the from an organizational perspective, right? And then he's given the example of teaching to the test phenomena, right? Where basically it's basically the idea that just to ensure, because the metrics of the schools and the staff and the teachers, the principals, everyone there are mainly based on whether how many children pass the exam. They would Their efforts will always be targeted towards having children pass the exam, and which is not necessarily the same as the children getting educated or getting quality education, right? So they are missing out on the goals of actually providing quality education to the children, to the students, and they are just focusing on the otherwise minor goals of just helping them pass the test, and hence the goal displacement idea, right? That's what the third paragraph is about. Okay, so let's go to the next para now. Okay, coming to the fourth para. Short termism is another negative. Measured performance encourages what the US sociologist Robert K. Merton in 1936 called the imperious immediacy of interests, where the actor's paramount concern is the foreseen immediate consequences, where the actor's paramount concern with the foreseen immediate consequences excludes consideration of further or other consequences. In short, advancing short-term goals at the expense of long-term, long-range considerations. This problem is endemic to publicly traded corporations that sacrifice long-term research and development and the development of their staff to the perceived imperatives of the quarterly report. Okay, so guys, in the fourth paragraph, he has basically elaborated on the third disadvantage of metric fixation, which is that often when this kind of when metric fixation is brought into the picture, the professionals often start focusing more on the short-term goals than on the long-term goals, right? They they uh, they uh, they basically lose sight of the long-term goals, right? Because they are more concerned with what might happen in the immediate future, right? And then he gives the example of publicly traded corporations here, for which this problem for whom this problem is quite common, okay, where they on a routine basis, or should I rather say on a regular basis, they don't invest so much, they fail to invest so much time and resources in research and development or in training of their staff, which might be helpful to them in the long term. So they end up not focusing on this in favor of focusing just on their quarterly reports, right? So which might not necessarily always lead to good long-term results, right? Or essentially they might be just missing out on some really good long-term results because they did not focus on focus their resources or allot their resources to actions which in the short term did not provide so much of benefits but might have provided exponential benefits in the future, right? So that's what he means by short termism. All right, so I hope this paragraph is also clear to you. Let's move on to the next, which I think which is the last paragraph. Okay, coming to the last paragraph, he basically says that to the debit side of the ledger must also be added the transactional costs of metrics, the expenditure of employee time by those tasked with compiling and processing the metrics in the first place, not to mention the time required to actually read them. Okay, so with this, he ends the paragraph. So, guys, many of you might have been a little flummoxed by why he uses this terminology of debit here, and he is and then the terminology of debit and ledger here. So, guys, I'll try to explain that to you. So, see, he has used the terminology of a ledger and the debit and the credit side. The credit side is implicit here, is implied the credit side, and he's directly talking about the debit side. The debit side is where you list out the resources which were used to create the metric system, right? And the credit side in this case is uh, the outcomes that were derived after creating the metric system. And first of all, please don't take the definitions of debit and credit which I'm providing you here out of the context. These are not accurate financial definitions of these terms. I'm just trying to use these makeshift definitions to help you understand the passage. Okay, so he basically on the debit side he has put the resources which have been involved in creating the metric system, in creating the reports, and on the credit side is basically the outcome of that, right? So he does not say anything about the credit side because he has essentially already talked about what we have on the credit side, the outcomes, and the outcomes are gaining, right? Phenomena like gaining, goal displacement, and short-termism, all the negative outcomes you already have on the resource side, the outcome side, all the three negative outcomes of the metric fixation idea, right? And then in addition to all of this, he basically says that to the debit side of the ledger must also be added. On the credit side, we already have three negative outcomes, and to the debit side must also be added the time that is required to create these metrics. He says that the expenditure of employee time by those tasked with compiling and processing the metrics in the first place, and not to mention the time required to actually read them. Okay, so I hope the last paragraph is now clear to everyone. So yeah, so that's about the passage explanation part. Let's move on to the central idea. Okay, guys, so the central idea of the passage can be summarized as follows. It is unlikely that metric-based performance evaluation methods might lead to organizational goal achievement, as they often lead to undesirable scenarios such as gaming, goal displacement, and short-termism, while adding to transactional costs such as the time taken to create and peruse the performance reports. Peruse means to closely read, right? So that's the central idea. Is basically just try to made the point that it is very unlikely that metric-based performance systems evaluation methods can lead to any kind of actual organizational goal achievement, because they and most of the times they just end up in leading to undesirable scenarios such as gaming, goal displacement. These are the three scenarios, disadvantages he has described, right? And short-termism. And in addition to that, there are also transactional costs involved, that such as the time taken to create the reports and the time taken to read the reports, right? So that's the central idea. Okay, so guys, with that we conclude the first part of this session of this RC, where we've discussed, where I've explained to you the passage and we have discussed the central idea. Now you can move on to the second part, where we discuss the questions by clicking on this video here. The video should be here by the time you're watching this. And for those of you who are new to these videos, if you want to know the introduction, if you want to see the intro video of the course, understand the pedagogy and the rationale that we have behind the pedagogy, you can click here and go and watch the intro video. Okay, that's about it so far as this video is concerned from Sluggers Blue for CAT VRC. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next one.